Hey everyone, and welcome to a mini deep dive into the world of
Unified.js.
Unified.js. You got it. We're going to try to tackle your biggest questions about hiring these specialized developers all in under 7 minutes. It's like having a personal expert, kind of like my guest here,
That's right.
to guide you through this niche area of development. And we're relying on some awesome resources today from theperfectdeveloper.com.
Free resource.
Yeah, a real authority in finding the best tech talent. In fact, if you're listening right now, why not head over to theperfectdeveloper.com and check out their 5 questions tool. It's a fantastic way to start your hiring journey. But first, let's break down the basics. What exactly is Unified.js and why are these developers so sought after?
Well, Unified.js is all about taking content-heavy projects and making them, well, unified. Imagine having a super efficient workflow for all your content needs, regardless of the format. That's what these developers excel at.
Okay, that sounds incredibly useful, especially with all the different types of content flying around these days. But what makes these developers different from, say, your typical front or back-end developer?
Think of it this way. Most developers work with code in a linear fashion, but Unified.js developers utilize something called syntax trees. It's like taking a sentence and instead of just reading it left to right, you break it down into its core grammatical components. Unified.js lets them manipulate content on this deeper structural level.
So instead of just seeing words on a page, they're seeing the underlying building blocks of the content itself.
Exactly.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
This means they can automate tasks, transform content between formats, and build incredibly powerful tools that most developers wouldn't even know where to begin with.
All right, you've piqued my interest.
Mhm.
So when would I, as someone looking to build a website or an app, actually need a Unified.js developer? What kind of problems do they solve that I might be facing right now?
Great question. Let's say you're drowning in a sea of markdown files, struggling to keep your website content updated. Or maybe you have tons of documentation that needs to be converted to different formats. Or perhaps you're dreaming of a custom CMS that perfectly fits your needs. These are all situations where a Unified.js developer can be your secret weapon.
Hmm, those scenarios sound very familiar,
Yeah.
especially the markdown struggles. I've definitely been there. Okay, I'm convinced I need one of these developers. But what specific skills should I be looking for? What makes a Unified.js developer stand out from the crowd?
Of course, a strong foundation in JavaScript is crucial, but it's more than just knowing the language. It's about understanding it deeply. And going back to the syntax trees we talked about, they need experience working with those, which is represented as ASTs in code.
So they need to be able to not just write code, but write it in a way that understands the very structure of the content.
You got it. Plus, they need to be familiar with the Unified.js ecosystem. Libraries like Remark for Markdown or Rehype for HTML. These are specialized tools that give them superpowers in the content world.
It's starting to sound like finding these developers is like searching for a unicorn. They have a very specialized skill set.
They definitely bring a unique set of talents to the table, but don't worry, we'll get to finding them in a bit. First, let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Oh, here we go.
Cost?
Ah, yes. The million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Perhaps literally. What kind of salary expectations are we talking about here?
That's where the perfectdeveloper.com's data comes in handy. They've found that in the US, a full-time Unified.js developer can command a salary of around $80,000 to $130,000 per year.
That's quite an investment.
Mm.
But what if I'm a startup with a limited budget? Or maybe I only need someone for a specific project? Are there more cost-effective options?
Absolutely. There are a few things you can consider. If you're open to working with remote developers, you can often find talent in places like Asia or Eastern Europe for significantly less. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's always the option of hiring freelancers, right?
Yeah, freelancers, they can be a great way to get those specialized skills on a project basis.
Exactly. Freelance platforms are a good place to start, and their rates can vary greatly, giving you more flexibility depending on your budget and the complexity of the project.
So there are a few different routes I can take depending on my needs and resources. But once I've figured out my budget, I imagine the next big decision is full-time, part-time, in-house, or outsource. How do I choose the right hiring model?
Each option has its own pros and cons. Let's break it down, starting with full-time versus part-time. Full-time is great if you have a constant stream of content work and want someone fully dedicated to your projects. It allows for deep integration into your team and processes.
Yeah, I can see that.
Hmm.
But I imagine that comes with the higher costs we discussed earlier, plus the whole hiring process, which can be time-consuming and a bit of a headache. You're absolutely right. Now, part-time can be a good compromise if your needs are more sporadic or if you only need help with specific projects.
Okay, makes sense. But what about the potential downsides of part-time?
Well, communication can be a bit more challenging when someone isn't fully embedded in your day-to-day operations. And there's always the risk of them being less available when you need them most.
So a bit of a trade-off there.
Yeah.
And what about the in-house versus outsourcing dilemma? It seems like more and more companies are choosing to go remote these days.
It's definitely a trend, and for good reason. In-house is fantastic for close collaboration and really building that team synergy. But if budget is a major concern, outsourcing can be a game changer.
I can see the appeal, especially if you're a smaller company. Having access to that wider talent pool without the overhead of hiring someone full-time must be really attractive.
Exactly. And with platforms like theperfectdeveloper.com, it's easier than ever to find highly skilled remote developers who specialize in Unified.js.
Okay, so we've covered the different hiring models, and it seems like the best choice really depends on each company's unique circumstances. But let's say I figured out my budget and my ideal hiring model. The next question is, where do I actually find these talented Unified.js developers? They seem like a rare breed.
Well, they're definitely not as common as your typical web developer, but finding them isn't mission impossible. Theperfectdeveloper.com actually has a whole guide on sourcing specialized tech talent. But here's a quick rundown.
Perfect, because I was just about to ask for those insider tips.
Job boards like LinkedIn are a good starting point, but don't just blast out a generic message. Use those advanced search filters to target candidates with specific Unified.js skills and experience. And don't forget about those freelance platforms we mentioned earlier. They can be gold mines for finding specialized talent.
So, being a bit more proactive and strategic with my search is key. Are there any other less obvious places I should be looking?
Absolutely. Think about it. Unified.js developers are passionate about content, so where do content-focused developers hang out?
Where do they hang out?
Online communities. Check out forums, discussion boards, and even open source projects related to Unified.js. That's where you'll find the real enthusiasts, the ones who are deeply engaged in the technology.
That's a great tip. I hadn't even thought about that. It seems like it's all about finding those niche communities where these developers are already active and contributing.
Exactly. It's about being a bit more targeted in your approach. Now, speaking of targeting, let's talk about crafting the perfect job description. You want to make sure you're attracting the right kind of talent.
That makes sense. How do I write a job description that really stands out and speaks to the unique skills and interests of a Unified.js developer?
It's all about being specific and highlighting the challenges and opportunities that are unique to working with Unified.js. Don't just list generic skills. Instead, paint a picture of the types of projects they'll be working on, the problems they'll be solving, and the impact they'll have on your company.
So it's about going beyond the typical bullet points and really selling the role, making it sound exciting and intellectually stimulating for someone who's passionate about this particular technology.
Precisely. You want to appeal to their desire to work on cutting-edge projects that push the boundaries of content management and web development.
All right, I'm starting to feel much more confident about finding and attracting these talented developers. But let's say I've managed to snag a fantastic Unified.js developer. How do I make sure they stick around? What are the key things to consider when it comes to retention?
Retention is crucial in any field, but especially when you're dealing with highly specialized talent. It goes beyond just offering a competitive salary, although that's definitely important.
What else can I do to create an environment where a Unified.js developer feels valued, challenged, and motivated to stay long-term?
Think about what drives these developers. It's the desire to work on interesting, challenging projects, to continuously learn and grow, and to be part of a team that values their expertise. So make sure you're offering opportunities for professional development.
That could involve sending them to conferences, encouraging them to contribute to open source projects, or even giving them the freedom to experiment with new technologies and ideas, right?
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of a positive and supportive work environment. Clear communication, open feedback, and a sense of shared purpose can go a long way in making someone feel like they're truly part of the team.
That makes sense. It's about creating a culture where their unique skills and contributions are recognized and appreciated.
Right. And remember, theperfectdeveloper.com has a wealth of resources on building and managing remote teams, so be sure to check those out as well. Now, we've covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time.
We've covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time, haven't we?
We have. It's amazing what you can accomplish in just a few minutes when you have the right information and the right resources.
Speaking of resources, I can't emphasize enough how valuable theperfectdeveloper.com has been throughout this whole deep dive. They truly are experts in navigating the world of tech talent.
Their insights and data have been invaluable in helping us break down this complex topic and make it feel much more approachable.
So to our listener, if you're feeling overwhelmed by the prospect of hiring a Unified.JS developer, don't worry. You're not alone, and you're definitely not starting from scratch.
That's right. Armed with the knowledge you've gained from this deep dive and with theperfectdeveloper.com as your ally, you're well equipped to tackle this challenge.
And remember that 5 questions tool we mentioned at the beginning. It's a fantastic way to get your hiring journey started on the right foot.
After this deep dive, head over to theperfectdeveloper.com and give it a try. It'll help you crystallize your needs and start identifying potential candidates who are a perfect fit for your project.
Now, before we wrap up, I have to ask, what's one key takeaway you hope our listener walks away with today?
That's easy. Unified.js developers are the future of content-driven projects. They have the unique skills and expertise to build the dynamic, personalized experiences that users crave.
And that as content continues to dominate the digital landscape, those skills are only going to become more and more valuable.
Exactly. So if you're looking to build a future-proof content strategy, finding and hiring a skilled Unified.js developer is an investment worth making.
Wise words to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this mini deep dive into the world of hiring Unified.js developers.
It was my pleasure. Happy hiring, everyone.